Hi, welcome to Take 5, where we daily consider devotional thoughts from Oswald Chambers' book, My Utmost for His Highest. Today is March 28th, and the title of today's devotional is, Isn't There Some Misunderstanding? Let us go to Judea again. Are you going there again? John 11, verses 7 and 8. The focus first deals with the time during which Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. Lazarus lived in the area known as Judea, where Jerusalem and the temple were located. Earlier in this gospel account, while Jesus had previously been in Judea, there were Jews who had picked up stones to throw at Christ, but he was able to twice elude them. Now Jesus is saying that they needed to return so to minister to Lazarus. And his disciples questioned him as to the wisdom of going back, for they figured it would get him killed. Chambers states, just because I don't understand what Jesus Christ says, I have no right to determine that he must be mistaken in what he says. That is a dangerous view, and it is never right to think that my obedience to God's directive will bring dishonor to Jesus. The disciples truly did believe that Christ was making a mistake by returning to Judea. There is an often overlooked pathetic response voiced by Thomas in verse 16, where he says, "Let us also go that we may die with him." Thomas encouraged them all to go, but with the absolute no sense of confidence in his being the right thing to do. Dr. Chambers says that the only thing that will bring dishonor is not obeying him. To put my view of his honor ahead of what he plainly guiding me to do is never right, even though it may come from a real desire to prevent him from being put to open shame. Thomas genuinely thought that this trip was highly ill-fated. None of the 12 could even imagine that within hours of their acquiescence to follow him, that he would call a dead man from the grave. We never need to be concerned of God making a fool of himself when he tells us something to do, though we really cannot see it from his vantage. Chambers continues, I know that when the instructions have come from God because of their quiet persistence, but when I begin to weigh the pros and cons and doubt and debate enter my mind, I am bringing in an element that is not of God. This will only result in my concluding that his instructions were not right to me. We have a knack in being able to talk our way out of obedience to God. I am facing that right now in some ways of pursuing ministry opportunities here in the Fort Worth, Texas area by means that may seem insane to some, but that I continue to feel as God's persistent encouraging of me. It would take too much room here to explain, but my point is that I must not allow for me to talk myself out of what God is leading me to do. This pretty much wraps up all that Dr. Chambers is teaching on today. Don't talk yourself out of obedience to God. He points out that many of us are faithful to our ideas about Jesus Christ, but how many of us are faithful to Jesus himself? Faithfulness to Jesus means that I must step out even when and where I can't see anything. Matthew 14 and verse 29. We often sit in church and nod in agreement with what the scripture says, but when it comes down to being a part of God's work and will, well, then we start backtracking with excuses and reasons as to why we can't participate. Chambers tells us faith is not intellectual understanding. Faith is a deliberate commitment to the person of Jesus Christ, even when I can't see the way ahead. He closes out by asking, are you debating whether you should take a step of faith in Jesus or whether you should wait until you can clearly see how to do what he has asked? Simply obey him with unrestrained joy. When he tells you something and you begin to debate, it is because you have misunderstood. You have a misunderstanding of what honors him and what doesn't. Are you faithful to Jesus, or are you faithful to your ideas about him? Are you faithful to what he says, or are you trying to compromise his words with thoughts that never came from him? Whatever he says to you, do it. John 2 and verse 5. If you haven't yet read today's devotional from Dr. Chambers, I encourage you to do so, for it will enhance the time that we spend together. It's available free online. Also, if you have any questions or comments about today's study, please share them below. As well, please share prayer requests as well. And now may God's grace and peace be ours as we seek to live our utmost for His highest. Thanks for being here today. God bless you. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day. Bye now.